Now there's 12 gates here. They're huge gates. And these gates have the name of the tribe of Israel on them, one of the names. Now in the ancient world, typically gates are named by what you either see out of the gate or what you see inside the gate. So here, it's likely that during the millennial kingdom, whatever name is on that gate, if it's Judah, then probably the tribe of Judah is living right outside of that gate. That's where they dwell. And then in the eternity, they move within that city, inside that gate. Verse 13 reminds us of the wilderness wanderings, where they arranged this way. We had 3 tribes of the north, west, east, and south. And the same thing for Ezekiel's prophecy in Ezekiel 48:31 of the New Jerusalem, where there's a square and 3 gates on each side, and the sons and tribes of Israel are on each side. Now in verse 14, it records, "And the wall of the city had 12 foundational stones, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb." Now, if you look off to the picture on here, there's a person here and there's a stone here. It's a huge stone that is about 5 feet wide, 4 feet high, and 30 feet long, and weighs around 80 to 100 tons, which was found in the foundation as a foundation stone in Jerusalem. And this, although being massive, it is tiny compared to the foundational stones being used in the city. The foundation stones in the city, which we're going to learn the city is 1,500 miles long. That means it'll be 500 miles long for one stone. And the stones could be just marking the outer lining, or they could be foundational stones going all the way in. Either way, these stones are massive. And they have the apostles' names, 1 apostle per stone. And seeing the tribes on the gates that are round, on top of the foundational stones, it shows a combination of the tribes and the apostles and the united, redeemed people of God in this city, in the New Jerusalem. And you notice that the apostles are described as the 12 apostles of the Lamb. It focuses on the redemption of the Lamb that was brought, that made the city and the people in it and the united peoples of God possible. So remember, the apostles are those who were sent out with a gospel to build his people. Now the next verse begins the 3rd section, which contains the description of the city in verses 15 through 21. And first we see the measurements of the city. 15 says, "And the one who spoke with me had a golden measuring rod to measure the city and its gates and its walls." Now the angel had a golden measuring rod. Gold probably represents the rod itself being precious, to measure something that's precious. And a typical rod was 10 feet, 4 inches long. So the angel is the one who does the measuring. And the measurements always have to do with God's ownership and protection of that city, and thus its people. So there's 3 parts that are to be measured. It's the city, its gates, and its walls, and thus the sum total of the city. Verse 16 says, "And the city was laid out as a square, and its length is as great as its width. And he measured the city with a rod. 1,500 miles, its length and width and heights are equal." So it's a cube. It's a huge cube. And it's like a city like we've never, ever known about or ever came into existence. There's no city that we know that's a cube. Now, it literally says, when our text says 1,500 miles, in Greek it says 1,200 stadia, which is the length of a stadium. And if you notice, it's 12 times 1,000, or thus an infinite multiple of 12. Its numbers symbolically are designed to show it's big enough for all. It's big enough for all. So that means that those foundational stones are at least 500 miles long, huge. Now, it's a good thing that the angel is the one doing the measurement with that 10-foot, 4-inch rod, or John would still be there measuring it. So what he measures is something that is so massive that if you laid that city over the United States, it goes from Houston all the way to New York. It is huge. Literally, it is 3,375,000,000 cubic miles. There's plenty of space for the redeemed of all time. And some might say, well, it'd be difficult to breathe atop the world's highest mountain today, which is 5 miles high. What about a city that's 1,500 miles high? You wouldn't be able to live up in the higher levels. It wouldn't be practical. Well, that's the case if the current laws of physics exist during the millennium. And so what we have is, because the city is those dimensions, it's either the laws have changed or our glorified bodies, the ones who are living in the city, are suited to these conditions. So in either way, this is the place of God's glorified people, his redeemed people. Now, if you notice, it's a cube, which is odd. And that cube actually represents the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies in the tabernacle was 15 by 15 squared. And in the temple, it's 30 by 30 squared. And it was the place where God dwells. It's where his presence was. And now his people dwell there as well. Where before, it was only the high priest was allowed to go in there once a year for just a short amount of time. Now people, because men have been glorified through Christ, can come into God's presence and have fellowship with him continually, in perfect fellowship and fellowship with each other. This is the measurement of the city. Now in verse 17, we see, and he measured its wall, 72 yards, according to human measurements, which are also angelic measurements. Now 72 yards refers to the thickness of the wall, which is about 216 feet. Literally, in Greek, it's 144 cubits. And you see the symbolism there, it's 12 times 12, which is a perfect multiple of 12. So the wall, a wall that is 1,500 miles high in the city needs a broader base than 72 yards. The thickness can't be 72 yards, and yet it goes all the way up 1,500 miles in today's architectural designs. And once again, the laws of physics there during the millennial kingdom can be different, or God is the one who designed it, and his architectural knowledge and materials might be, probably are, they are perfect and could handle this structure. So these dimensions are big. That wall is as thick as, almost as thick as a football field, as represented here. So some might say, these dimensions are too big. You're talking about an angel, it's a vision, they're not real. Notice John says the angelic measuring rod is the same. He clarifies that the literal structure is there, and it's measured by human measurements, which is the same as angelic measurements. So, because someone might come and say, well, the angelic measuring rod must be different. And John is clarifying that no. And because he gives the exact measurements and human measurements, it shows that this is a literal structure. But it contains symbolic elements and design. So John moves now from the dimensions to the materials of the city. Now you notice it's curious that he doesn't tell us the measurements of the gates, although it'll be implied in verse 21. So let's continue with verse 18 and the beginning of 19, where he says, the material of the wall was jasper, and the city was pure gold, like clear glass. And the foundation stones of the city wall were adorned with every kind of precious stone. Now, first, gold is opaque. It doesn't let light through. It's not clear. So John may be referring to some its shiny appearance, but more likely it's referring to translucent gold, something that we don't know about that's going to be a heavenly material. And we've already seen that the wall of being jasper is like a diamond. So the New Jerusalem's wall and buildings, they radiate the glory of God. They're translucent so God's glory can shine through them. Some may be concerned that the city's translucence will prevent any privacy. because everyone could see through walls. You'd be literally living in a glass house. But there will be nothing in that city, however, that calls for privacy. We'll be perfect. We'll be glorified. And in gold, that the city is built out of, this pure gold, it recalls the sanctuary of Solomon's temple, which was had gold all throughout it. It was overlaid with gold. It was covered completely with gold in 1 Kings 6, 20 through 22. So when John describes each foundation stone, we get a grand image of beauty. Verse 19 says, the first foundation stone was a jasper, which we have that diamond. The second is sapphire. The third is chalcedony. The fourth is emerald. The fifth is sardonyx. The sixth is sardius. The seventh is chrysolite. The eighth is beryl. The ninth is topaz. The 10th is chrysoprase. The 11th is jacinite. And the 12th is amethyst. So just looking at these colors, making up the foundation, and then God's shining glory would go through them and refract. His light would refract through them and go out into all the world, coming out from the city. These are massive foundation stones, and the light would just color the universe. And these stones and the colors, they actually mirror and correspond to the stones that are in the breastplate of the high priest. The stones there are all the same, except for a few of them that have different names, but in the ancient languages, they are synonymous or they're parallel over into what the color and the kind of stone that it is. So when the foundations are viewed with these stones, it is reminiscent of the city itself being a priestly city for divine worship, which reflects its people. And in fact, in Revelation, the people are called priests in 1:6, 5:10, and 20, verse 6. So they are characterized as being precious and beautiful stones. And finally, in verse 21, John records that, and the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each one of the gates was a single pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. So the pearls in the ancient world had great worth. They were considered one of the most luxurious of all jewels. And the word for pearl became a figure of speech for that which is of supreme worth. So since the walls are 126 feet thick, so also are the pearls. That is its measurement. And then it says the streets of the city were pure gold, like transparent glass. It's the same material that the city itself is built off of. The streets, the word for street there refers to a major or broad road. It's going to be the major highway through the city. And you're going to get these streets with every one of the gates are going to have one of these major streets going in. So notice everything is transparent and lets the light of God's glory shine and refract unrestricted through it. And it's just a place of beauty. It's filled with God's glory. And that's the material. Okay, so let's move to applications. The eternal city of Jerusalem is described as a place of incredible beauty and wealth. Rare and exquisite stones and materials are commonplace there. We are destined to live in such splendor and glory forever because that reflects the glory of God. Our eternal home is a place of unity among God's redeemed people, living together in complete love and harmony. It is more importantly a place where we will dwell in perfect fellowship with God. When this world is its darkest, think on these things. Number 2, the city of God was built and has given his people, was given to his people to display his glory. It is built with the most costly, prized, and beautiful materials found on earth. The city's elegance and great value reflects God's view of its population. Because of Christ's work in you, God sees you as his cherished new creation who is fit to live in gold, pearls, and precious and costly stones. Your heavenly Father treasures you. Third, the New Jerusalem is also described as having a massive wall and with angels guarding its gates. It is completely secure and protected from sin, corruption, and loss. Our eternal abode and its people are eternally secure. In God, we have peace. And that is part one of the eternal dwelling, the vision of the glorious bride, Jerusalem.